I took out a loan for my brother. Now I'm being sued and he's posting about family betrayal on, and then I never imagined the person who'd ruin my credit and leave me drowning in legal threats would be the same person I once bailed out of detention with a forged excuse note in high school. My brother Derek always had that talent, the kind that let him talk his way out of any kind of consequence while leaving me to pick up whatever shards he left behind. He's 3 years younger than me, and I've been cleaning up after him since we were kids growing up in Pine Falls, Louisiana. Back then it was little things. Lying to our parents about who broke the lamp or who failed a math test. He'd flash that smug little smirk, and somehow everyone believed him when he said I was being dramatic. I should have known better than to trust someone who's been conning me since the age of 10. But here I am now, 20 minutes into reading a legal notice from a loan company threatening court action against me for a debt I didn't even benefit from. My name is on the paperwork. My credit is imploding. And the guy responsible? He's probably sprawled out on a leather couch, sipping whiskey he shouldn't be able to afford, wondering why I'm making such a fuss. Let me back up. About 10 months ago, Derek showed up at my apartment out of the blue. I hadn't seen him in person since the previous Thanksgiving, and honestly, that should have been my first red flag. He was wearing some overpriced jacket, tapping his fingers against the granite countertop like he was waiting for a job interview. I should have thrown him out the second he started speaking. "Sis," he said, pulling out a stack of loan paperwork like it was a damn group project. "I really need a favor. I've got this investment opportunity, something huge, and the bank just needs a co-signer for the loan. It's all above board. They're weird about credit scores these days, and mine's a little low because of some billing error." I stood there looking at the numbers, my gut already screaming to get the hell out of there. It was $42,000. Not a few hundred. Not even $5,000. $42,000. "Why can't you qualify for it yourself?" I asked him, already knowing the answer would be complete bullshit. He shrugged like it wasn't a big deal. "Credit's fine, just not bank fine, you know? I swear, Sierra, I'll make every payment myself. I just need your name so they'll approve it. I'll have it paid off in under a year, I promise." He always promises. It's what he does. And I, being the older sibling who had spent a lifetime believing that maybe this time would be different, signed the papers against every screaming instinct I had. I didn't want to be the bad guy. I didn't want to be the sister who turned her back. I wanted to believe my brother wasn't just another smooth-talking leech. For a few months, everything seemed fine. He sent me screenshots showing the payments were being made. I stopped thinking about the loan altogether because it didn't feel like mine anymore. He had assured me this was a technicality, a formality, and I had no reason not to believe him, until the first phone call came in. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was elbow-deep in spreadsheets at work when I saw the unknown number. I usually let those go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. "Miss Sierra," the voice said, sharp and emotionless. "This is a courtesy call regarding your account. You are 2 months past due on your personal loan balance. We've sent notices and left messages." I felt my throat tighten. There's been a mistake. My brother was handling those payments. I'm just the co-signer. There was a long pause, the kind that makes your stomach turn. "Ma'am, the account is in your name. As the primary borrower, you are responsible." After I hung up, I tried calling Derek 3 times. He didn't answer until the 4th call, and when he did, he sounded half asleep and completely unbothered. I told him what the bank said, laid it out clearly, and his response: "Relax, Sierra. You're acting like it's the end of the world. I'll get to it." That was his default mode. Chill. Indifferent. Dismissive. The next month came and went, and I got another call. This time the tone was firmer. "If you cannot make payment arrangements, this may move to legal collections." I was shaking by the time I hung up. When I called Derek again, he acted like I was harassing him. "Sierra, you agreed to this. Don't come crying to me now like I forced you. It's just a loan. Chill out." That's when I realized this had never been a miscommunication or a delay. Derek never planned to pay it back at all. I'd love to tell you I calmly explained my frustration and asked for a solution like an adult. I'd love to say I gave him one last chance to fix things before losing my temper. But none of that happened. What happened was far less noble and way more satisfying. I showed up at his apartment unannounced the next Saturday. I was still steaming when I parked my car across the street and saw the ridiculous building he was living in. Gated entry, lush palm trees, a building that reeked of overpriced taste and undeserved wealth. How he got approved for a place like that with bad credit and zero responsibility was beyond me. Maybe someone else signed for him. Maybe he lied. Again, I banged on the door until I heard footsteps. "Open up, Derek. I swear, if you don't answer, I'm going to start yelling personal medical conditions through this hallway." The door opened. His face was a mess of bed hair and confusion. "What the hell, Sierra?" he groaned, rubbing his eyes like I was the problem here. I shoved past him before he could stop me, and that's when I saw it. His apartment looked like a showroom for things people buy when they're pretending to be successful. A brand new flat-screen TV dominated the living room wall. A PS5 sat in the middle of a spotless entertainment center next to a gaming PC still wrapped in plastic. Designer sneakers were neatly lined up by the door like some damn influencer display. And on the kitchen counter, I counted 3 bottles of imported whiskey, unopened, gleaming under the lights like trophies. I turned to him, stunned. "You said you didn't have the money," I said, my voice low and cold. He flopped onto the couch like this was just another sibling spat. "I don't have liquid cash, Sierra. That's different. I just needed a few essentials for the apartment." "You needed a gaming setup?" I shouted, pointing at the thousands of dollars in tech around us. "While I'm getting sued." He rolled his eyes. "You're being dramatic again. Jesus." And that, right there, broke something inside me. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't even remotely aware of the damage he'd caused. I snapped. Before he could react, I reached down, grabbed the PS5, and flung it across the room. It hit the hardwood floor with a horrible crack and rolled to a stop like a dying animal. "Are you out of your mind?" he yelled, bolting up like I'd just murdered someone. That was a limited edition console. I picked up one of the whiskey bottles and held it in both hands. "Try me," I said through clenched teeth. "I swear, Derek, I will destroy every expensive piece of garbage in this place if you don't start fixing this right now." He panicked. For the first time in his life, I think he saw I wasn't bluffing. "I'll pay it," he said quickly. "I swear I'll pay it. I'll make the first payment today. Just put the bottle down." I did, and then I smiled. For the first time since this nightmare started, I had the upper hand. The next morning, like some miracle straight out of a Sunday sermon, I got a notification from the bank confirming a payment had been made. My brother, the master of doing absolutely nothing unless forced, had finally transferred money to the account. Real money, not promises or excuses or empty reassurances that next month will be better. I stared at the email for a solid 5 minutes, half expecting it to vanish like a mirage or glitch. But it was real. For the first time in this whole nightmare, something had actually gone right. But if I thought that meant things would start improving, or that Derek had suddenly become a responsible human being who realized his actions had consequences, I was wrong. So very wrong. Because 2 days after that payment, I got a call from my mother. And let me tell you, her voice didn't sound relieved, supportive, or even mildly appreciative that I had finally lit a fire under her son's ass. It sounded furious. "Sierra," she said before I could even greet her, "what in the world did you do to your brother?" I closed my eyes, instantly regretting answering the call. "What did he tell you?" "He said you completely overreacted," she said, her voice laced with maternal judgment that I hadn't heard since I forgot her birthday in college. "He said you showed up at his place, destroyed his belongings, and scared him half to death." I laughed. It wasn't a happy or amused laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes right before someone breaks a table in half. "Oh, you mean after he lied to me, stole my credit, refused to pay the loan, and got me sued? That part." "Sierra, he was going to pay eventually," she replied, like those words held any weight at all. "You know how Derek is." "Yes," I said flatly, "I do. Which is why I should have never trusted him in the first place." My mother let out a long, dramatic sigh, the kind she used whenever I didn't back down or play the peacekeeper role she had always expected from me. "He's been under a lot of stress lately. You know he's going through a rough patch." "A rough patch?" I practically shouted. "Mom, he's living in a luxury apartment, buying top-shelf whiskey, blowing money on tech he doesn't need. And you want me to feel bad for him? He told me he was barely getting by, she insisted. Did you even ask to see his finances before believing that? Of course not, she snapped. He's my son. I trust him. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Not because she trusted him, she always had, but because she never extended that same grace to me. Even when I was the one working late nights, paying bills on time, keeping things from falling apart. I was silent for a second, then I said what I should have said years ago. Then trust him to fix this, because I'm done. I'm not cleaning up after him again. Sierra, please, he's your brother. No, Mom, I said, finally done playing the obedient daughter. He's your son. He's your problem. I've done more than enough. And for the first time in my life, I hung up on her. I didn't hear from Derek for a few days after that, and honestly, I started to think maybe the message had gotten through. Maybe smashing his precious PlayStation and getting Mom involved had finally forced him to face reality. But that fantasy crumbled fast. For days after our blow-up, I got a text from him. It just said, "Hey, can we talk?" I stared at it for a solid minute. The smarter part of me said to delete it and go on with my day, but a tiny piece of me, the one that had kept hoping for him to grow up, wondered if this might be an actual apology. I texted back a short, cautious reply. "What do you want?" He responded almost immediately. "Can we meet for coffee? I just want to talk." I should have said no. I should have blocked his number right then and there. But curiosity got the better of me, so I said yes. I met him at this little diner we used to go to as kids, the kind of place that serves burnt coffee and pancakes that taste like nostalgia and grease. He was already there when I arrived, looking unusually twitchy. He was fidgeting with his cup like he'd never held one before, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. That should have been the tip-off. "Okay," I said, crossing my arms. "Talk." He sighed like he was preparing for some great performance. "Look, I know I messed up." I raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. "And I get why you were mad," he added. Still waiting. "But," he said, dragging out the word like it was physically painful, "you have to admit, you went a little overboard." I blinked. "Excuse me." He actually had the gall to look wounded. "You smashed my PlayStation, Sierra. Do you know how expensive that was?" That was the moment I knew nothing had changed. Not one damn thing. I laughed, but there wasn't an ounce of humor in it. "You mean the PlayStation you bought instead of paying the loan you scammed me into taking? The one that wrecked my credit and got me dragged into court?" "I was going to pay it back," he muttered, like that somehow made it better. "When? After your next shopping spree? After the bank took me to court?" People were starting to stare, but I didn't care. I was tired of being the quiet one, the calm one, the responsible sibling who let everything slide just to keep the peace. "You sat there in your decked-out apartment with your premium cable and overpriced shoes while I was getting harassed by collections agents," I said. "And now you're here because what? You want me to feel bad about a toy you lost?" He flinched, finally. "Okay, I get it. You're upset." "I'm not upset," I told him. "I'm done." "That's different." His expression faltered. "What do you mean, done?" "I mean I'm done helping you. Done trusting you. Done being your emotional punching bag. You've used up every chance I ever gave you." His jaw clenched. "So that's it. You're cutting me out of your life." I stood up, grabbed my bag, and didn't even look back. "You cut yourself out when you lied to me. Goodbye, Derek." And I walked out. It's been almost a month since that conversation, and I haven't heard from him once. My mother still calls, though, usually to tell me how hard things have been for him, how he feels terrible, how he's really trying. I don't answer anymore. I let the calls go to voicemail, and I delete them without listening. The bank, on the other hand, loves me now. The payments are showing up on time, finally. I still get letters reminding me of the outstanding balance, and my credit score is limping along like it just crawled out of a car crash, but the fire is out. For the first time in months, I can sleep without imagining a courtroom. Derek, I assume, is figuring things out on his own now. Or maybe he's not. Maybe he's conning someone else into cleaning up after him. But he won't be conning me. Not anymore. I thought cutting Derek off would finally bring me some peace, maybe even closure. I imagined a quiet stretch of time where I could rebuild what was left of my credit and sanity, free from his endless drama. But if there's one thing I've learned about my brother, it's that he doesn't believe in endings. at least not ones he doesn't control. It started with a text from my mother. One line. Emma, you need to call me. It's urgent. I stared at it for a few minutes before deciding to ignore it. With my family, urgent could mean anything from Derek needing a kidney to him being mildly inconvenienced by a parking ticket. I put my phone down and went back to my day, pretending I hadn't seen it. 2 hours later, another message lit up my screen. Your brother's in trouble. He really needs your help. I groaned out loud, rubbed my eyes, and finally gave in. When I called, she picked up immediately like she'd been staring at her phone waiting for my name to appear. Emma, thank goodness, she said, skipping the greeting entirely. Listen, I know you're still upset, but Derek is in a really bad situation. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. What now? She hesitated, and that alone was enough to tell me I wasn't going to like the answer. He lost his apartment. I blinked. What do you mean he lost it? Well, she said carefully, the rent was a little behind. That was the understatement of the year. Derek didn't fall behind. He probably hadn't paid in months. I could already picture him using rent money on new sneakers or some garbage subscription box full of beard oils and protein powder. So let me get this straight, I said, trying not to laugh. He was living in a high-end apartment, buying video game consoles and sipping whiskey that costs more than my monthly car insurance. And now he's being evicted? He's had some financial setbacks, she insisted, as if the words meant anything anymore. He's been staying with a friend, but it's not working out. He needs somewhere to go. I felt the slow burn start in my chest. You're not seriously about to ask what I think you're about to ask. I was thinking, she said, powering through like she hadn't heard me. Maybe he could stay with you for a little while, just until he gets back on his feet. I nearly dropped the phone. Absolutely not. It's just temporary, she rushed to say. You have a spare room, don't you? I laughed. I actually laughed out loud because the idea was so far beyond absurd it felt like satire. Mom, he stole my credit, destroyed my finances, and nearly got me sued. And now you think I should let him move in with me? He's your brother, she said, like that was supposed to mean something after everything. And that's exactly why he's not stepping foot in my apartment. There was a pause, and then she said, Emma, please. He has nowhere else to go. I narrowed my eyes even though she couldn't see me. So your house is full then? She hesitated again. You know how your father feels about that. Of course. Dad had already said no, and rather than push Derek to take responsibility, my mother had decided it was my job to absorb the impact. Again, I'm sorry, I said, voice steady and cold. My answer is no. She gasped like I had just told her I was kicking a puppy into traffic. Emma, you can't be serious. Where is he supposed to go? I don't know, I said. A friend's couch, a motel, a damn park bench for all I care. He's not coming here. You're being cruel. No, I replied. I was cruel to myself for years by letting him walk all over me. That ends now. And I hung up before she could say anything else. I truly believed that would be the end of it. I thought I had made myself perfectly clear and that Derek, no matter how entitled he was, wouldn't have the audacity to show up uninvited. I was wrong. The next evening, I got home from work, exhausted and barely functioning. I was already fantasizing about microwaving some leftovers and collapsing on the couch when I opened my door and froze. Derek was sitting at my kitchen counter, eating my pasta. He looked up, completely unbothered, with a fork in his mouth and that same smug expression that made my blood boil. Hey, sis. I dropped my bag. What the actual hell are you doing in my apartment? He swallowed like this was just a casual Tuesday. Mom gave me your spare key. Figured you'd come around eventually. She what? She said you'd understand if I just showed up. You always do. I took a deep breath and counted to 10. It didn't help. Get out, I said, pointing toward the door like I was exorcising a demon. He put his fork down and leaned back like he lived there. Come on, Emma. It's just for a little while. I'll find something soon. No, absolutely not. You can't just break into my apartment and decide you live here. I didn't break in, he said, somehow sounding offended. Mom said it was okay. Well, your mom doesn't live here, I snapped. And I don't care what she said. You need to leave. Now. He stood. Finally. But instead of apologizing or acting embarrassed like any sane person would, he glared at me. "I always knew you were selfish." I laughed, because the irony was so thick I could barely breathe. That's rich coming from the guy who scammed his own sister and destroyed her credit. He rolled his eyes and stormed out, muttering something under his breath. I locked the door behind him. Then I changed the locks the next morning. Of course, Derek didn't disappear quietly. The very next day, my mom called me at work, absolutely livid. "Emma, how could you throw your brother out like that?" she screeched before I even said hello. "Easily," I replied. "He was in my house, eating my food, using a key I never gave him. He had nowhere to go. Then maybe he should have thought about that before buying overpriced whiskey instead of paying his rent. He's family, Emma. Then why don't you take him in?" She went silent. Then, in a much softer voice, she whispered, "You know your father won't allow that." So there it was. Because my father had drawn a boundary, she thought I should tear mine down. I was supposed to open my doors, my fridge, my life, and let Derek settle in like a leech while she played the concerned bystander. "I've done enough," I said. "He used me. I'm not doing it again." She started crying. I hung up. That was 2 weeks ago. I haven't heard from Derek since. Mom still calls occasionally, usually to remind me how cold I am or how families don't abandon each other. I ignore her now. My credit score is slowly starting to crawl out of the pit Derek threw it into, and I've finally started sleeping through the night without jumping awake at every notification. And for once, despite the chaos, I feel something I haven't felt in years: peace. I honestly believe that changing the locks and cutting off communication would be the end of the chaos. I had this brief, naive hope that Derek would finally hit rock bottom and maybe, just maybe, learn something from the collapse he brought on himself. But that's the thing about people like him. When they can't control you directly anymore, they start looking for roundabout ways to worm back in. It began with a morning like any other. I was sitting on my couch, sipping burnt coffee from the same chipped mug I've had since college, scrolling through my phone before work. That's when I saw it, the Facebook post. A massive wall of text that looked like someone had poured out their diary with the dramatic flair of a soap opera script. The post was public, tagged with vague hashtags like hashtag family betrayal and hashtag some people change, and a whole lot of performative emojis. I didn't even need to read the name to know who had written it. Derek had decided that if he couldn't manipulate me in private, he'd try to shame me in public. The post opened with something like, "It's hard when the people you love turn their backs on you." I never thought my own sister would throw me out onto the streets when I needed her most. He spun this whole fictional tale about being a loyal, caring brother who was simply going through a rough time, and how I, cold, heartless, greedy, abandoned him when he needed me more than ever. He left out the loan, the unpaid rent, the court summons, the part where he illegally entered my home and ate my dinner like he had a right to it. According to Derek, I was just a money-obsessed narcissist who let success poison her heart. I would have laughed if the comments hadn't made me want to scream. There were hundreds, literal hundreds. "Stay strong, Derek. Some people only care about money. You don't need toxic energy in your life." It was like reading a pylon in a reality show fan forum, except I was the villain in a story I hadn't even agreed to be in. Then I saw the worst part: my mother, front and center in the comment section, typing out what might as well have been a handwritten betrayal letter. "We love you so much, sweetheart. Don't worry. You'll always have a home with us. Some people forget what family means, but we know better." I nearly dropped my phone. Not only had she fed him my spare key and tried to guilt-trip me into housing him, she was now publicly coddling him while everyone else tore me apart for daring to have a boundary. I didn't comment. I didn't engage. I refused to play into his little stage production, no matter how many strangers were handing him virtual hugs and telling him how brave he was. But of course, Derek wasn't satisfied with public sympathy alone. He had to escalate. 2 days after the post, I got a text from an unknown number. "You should be ashamed of yourself." I stared at it for a second, blinked, then typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came quickly. "A friend of Derek's. Unlike you, some of us actually care about family." I didn't reply. I just blocked the number. But it kept happening. Different numbers, vague insults, passive-aggressive jabs about how I'd lost my humanity, and how money will never replace love. It was like Derek had turned my life into his own pathetic PR campaign, and his idiot followers were lining up to take a swing. Then came the final straw. My landlord called. I hadn't heard from him since I signed the lease almost 3 years ago, so I immediately assumed the worst. "Emma," he said, his tone somewhere between confused and annoyed. "We got a report that you've been illegally subletting your apartment." I almost dropped the phone. "What?" I asked, already feeling my blood pressure spike. "That's ridiculous. I live alone. I've never sublet a day in my life." He sighed. "Yeah, I figured. The complaint was anonymous. No evidence. Just a message saying you had someone staying here who wasn't on the lease." I sat there stunned. Derek. It had to be Derek. "Don't worry," my landlord added quickly. "I told building management it was clearly nonsense and flagged it as resolved. But I figured you should know. Someone's trying to stir up trouble for you." I thanked him, hung up, and for a moment, just stared at the wall. This was what it had come to. He couldn't guilt me, couldn't guilt-trip me, couldn't charm his way back into my life. So now he was throwing darts in the dark, hoping one of them would hit something valuable. I felt something between rage and pity. This was a man who had burned every bridge he touched and was now standing in the ashes throwing tantrums at the smoke. I didn't waste another second. I pulled out my phone and sent him one final message. "I know you called my landlord. I know you're trying to screw with me. Let me make something very clear. I am done playing your games. You are out of my life. Permanently. Do not text me. Do not try to accidentally bump into me. If you keep harassing me, I will involve the police. Do you understand?" He left me on read. That was probably the smartest thing he's done in years. 2 weeks have passed since that message, and for once, there has been complete silence. No texts, no calls, no surprise appearances at my door, no anonymous threats or passive-aggressive family voicemails. Just silence. I've muted my mother's social media because she hasn't stopped with her cryptic, judgmental posts about loyalty and forgiveness. My dad, who somehow still manages to avoid conflict like a professional diplomat, quietly texted me, "I get it. I just wish your mother did." But even he refuses to say anything out loud when she's in the room. And me? I feel lighter. Like I've been carrying this rotting weight on my back for years and suddenly, it's just gone. There are still scars, of course. My credit score is still recovering like it just got out of the hospital. I still get the occasional side eye from extended family who bought into Derek's sob story. But for the first time in my adult life, I feel free. Not from debt or bills or responsibility, but from the toxic circus I used to call my family. I should have known better than to believe the quiet would last. For people like Derek, silence isn't an end. It's just a pause, the moment they sit back and recalibrate, waiting for another angle to launch their next self-inflicted disaster. The difference now is that I'm no longer part of the collateral damage. I used to be the person standing between him and the consequences of his own choices, the buffer he relied on whenever things spiraled out of control. Not anymore. It had been about 6 weeks since my last message to him, the one where I drew the line in concrete, not sand. And for a while, it stuck. No messages, no surprise appearances, no manipulative family group chats trying to stage an emotional intervention. Just my quiet little life coming back together, one overdue bill and credit dispute at a time. Then I got a call from my cousin Jules, who I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Her voice was tight with barely restrained laughter before she even finished saying hello. "Emma," she said, gasping for breath through the phone. "You need to get on Instagram right now." The words alone made me feel tired. What did he do? You have to see it for yourself. I can't do it justice. Against my better judgment, I opened the app and braced myself. There, pinned right at the top of Derek's story, was a shiny, overproduced video. Romantic music. Golden hour lighting. A woman's hand extended toward the camera, a ring sparkling on her finger. Derek's voiceover, full of fake sincerity, saying something like, "When you know, you know." My jaw dropped. Derek was engaged. 3 months after getting kicked out of his apartment, 4 months after nearly getting me sued, and 6 months after weaponizing our family against me, He was standing in a rose garden with a woman I'd never seen before, acting like he had finally found the love of his life. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters." I couldn't believe it. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of how someone could jump from complete emotional chaos to diamond rings and public declarations of eternal love. The only logical conclusion was that he'd never actually stopped seeing her, even while he was begging me and my mother to bail him out. I sent the video to my dad with a single message. "Did you know about this?" He replied a few minutes later, "I had no idea. Your mother is calling people." Of course she was. Later that night, Jules called me again and said she'd done some digging. Turns out the new fiancée, a woman named Betrayal, was a wellness coach who ran an online business selling crystals, herbal teas, and emotional alignment consultations for $249 a session. Her Instagram bio said, "Helping high-vibration souls break free from low-energy attachments." If there was ever someone built to fall for Derek's charm, it was her. They'd apparently met at a networking brunch she hosted downtown for ambitious spiritual entrepreneurs, which sounds exactly like the kind of place Derek would crash while pretending to own a tech startup. They started dating almost immediately. Based on the timeline, he was likely already with her while he was sleeping on friends' couches and trying to sneak into my apartment under the guise of having nowhere else to go. I wasn't surprised. Not really. But I was annoyed. Not because he had moved on or found someone new, but because it was so painfully obvious that he was doing it again. Rewriting his story, presenting a polished version of his life to someone who hadn't seen what a mess he really was underneath the charm and photo filters. I chose not to reach out. I didn't comment. I didn't warn her. I'd done enough. If Brielle wanted to find out who Derek really was, she could learn the hard way like the rest of us. 3 months later, she did. The first clue came when I got a message from Jules again. Just a screenshot. It was Brielle's Instagram profile, and the engagement photos were gone. In their place was a long, emotional caption about growth, betrayal, and finally recognizing the patterns I've been ignoring. Beneath that was a quote image that read, "Sometimes the person you thought was your soulmate is just a lesson in disguise." I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my cereal. The next post? A blurry photo of a candlelit altar and the caption, "Burning away the lies. Reclaiming my energy." That was all the confirmation I needed. Another relationship down in flames. Another person who had finally seen past Derek's curated nonsense and gotten a taste of the chaos that came with loving him. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel happy. But I did feel something close to peace, like the final piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. He didn't change. He never would. He didn't hit rock bottom because people like Derek don't hit bottom. They bounce. From person to person. From crisis to crisis. Always surviving, never growing. And me? I finally got out of the blast radius. Since then, things have been weirdly calm. My credit score is climbing again, slowly but surely. I got approved for a lower interest card, which honestly felt like a win worthy of a parade. I've stopped waking up with that sense of dread in my stomach every time I check my mail. I no longer panic when I see an unfamiliar number pop up on my phone. That constant buzzing anxiety that used to follow me everywhere like a shadow? Gone. My mother still tries, of course. She sends me articles about forgiveness, tagged with passive-aggressive messages like, "Just something to think about." I stopped reading them after the third one. My dad, still stuck in the middle, occasionally texts me updates about the family, which is code for "your brother is still a disaster, but I'm pretending not to notice." I told them both that if Derek ever reaches out to me again, I'll go straight to the police and file a harassment report. That shut down the conversation pretty fast. I haven't spoken to Derek in months. I haven't seen him, haven't heard from him, haven't received a single apology or acknowledgement of what he did. And the funny thing is, I don't need it anymore. For the longest time, I held on to this fantasy that one day he'd wake up and realize what he'd done. That he'd come back, genuinely sorry, ready to make it right. But that was just another lie I told myself to make the pain more manageable. The truth is, some people never change. Some people will always be the storm, and others will always be expected to hold the umbrella. I've put the umbrella down. I'm not waiting for him to fix things. I'm not leaving the door open for some heartfelt reconciliation. I'm not wondering what he's doing or who he's with or whether he's finally paying his bills. I don't care. I've finally reached the point where his existence doesn't affect my own. He can spin his stories, charm his next victim, and burn through whatever goodwill he manages to scam from strangers. That's not my problem anymore. I finally chose myself, and I'll never go back.